welcome back to the We're So Bloody Early podcast. Today, we're very excited to welcome another guest on the show. We have Mr. Daniel Prince.
Hey guys, great to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us.
I just want to ask, actually, Jigs.
Yeah, go.
That's an impressive drinks cabinet or something behind you there. What are you rocking back there?
Lots of whiskeys and vodkas and yeah, my wife likes gin. There's a lot of gin in there.
My wife, right? It's her fault. Yeah.
That makes a good backdrop, doesn't it? I agree.
It is. It's a real South African thing. You know that you've become an adult when you can have a drinks cabinet like that in your house. You know.
So we've got a South African guy and an English guy calling in from Australia. Is that correct?
Correct. And we have a third co-host who has the Aussie accent for us. So we do have a local representing on the team as well. Hopefully he'll join us over the next hour or so. We're not quite sure where he is. It's bedtime here, so maybe he's wrapped up dealing with his family and stuff. So Daniel, to kick things off, we'd love to get to know you a bit better and understand a bit more about yourself and your background and really just the journey that brought you to our great friend Bitcoin. And we'll see where it takes us, I guess. So just to start right back at the beginning, could you give a little summary for the people listening out there as to what you're up to today? And then we'll dig back into what brought you to today.
Yeah, absolutely. What am I up to today? Yeah, stacking sats as hard as I can, basically. And running the although my daughter Lauren would like to take all the fame away from myself and say she runs the BITten podcast, but she is a co-host with me, and that's what we've been concentrating on for the last few years, currently living in France. And I was inspired to start a podcast just like yourselves, most likely. I saw something that I needed to tell as many people about as humanly possible. And I was getting a lot of strange looks and nowhere with my friends and family when I was talking to them about Bitcoin and trying to explain it to them and telling them, this is the lifeline, guys. You got to get on the train right now. This is it. This is our chance. This is the one thing that we're going to be, it didn't work. So I was originally going to start reading articles, just record myself reading articles and send them to my friends. And I remember putting out a tweet saying, would anybody else be interested in doing this or listening to these? And I just got immediate response. Yeah, Guy Swan does that. So I was like, there's someone doing it. Brilliant. So I started listening to him and sharing his articles around. So he saved me a lot of work. But then I just couldn't sit on the sidelines anymore. And I knew I'd be able to add some kind of value if I started a podcast. So that's what I did in the end.
Wicked. And so the Once Bitten podcast. So when did you start precisely?
First episode was 31st of January, 2020, I guess. Yeah. 2 months before lockdowns and all that kind of madness happened.
So coming up to the kind of the 2-year anniversary, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Fantastic. And so some of those family and friends that you were originally trying to teach, have they now bought any Bitcoin as a result of your podcast, or are they still very much proving tricky to persuade?
There's been a little uptake, yes. There certainly has. There are still many that just poo-poo it. The closest members of my family, that's still the big hurt. A few of them are in, but nowhere near as much as they should be. Just dipping their fingers and toes in the water, that's okay. You've got to start somewhere. But there's not much work being put in. There's not the books being read or the articles being read or even the podcasts being listened to be quite frank. So even though, there's, your son or your brother or your cousin and your niece or your granddaughter or, whatever, hosting this thing still doesn't seem to be making the rounds too deeply into the realms of the familial circle. But this is a common theme, in fact. Even people that I've interviewed who you would think oh yeah, their whole family must be on board. No, they're struggling. All the authors are struggling. All the podcast hosts are struggling. This is a common theme within the Bitcoin space, and this is why we end up talking to complete randos on Twitter and under behind pseudonyms and whatever else, because that's where we find our tribe.
It's interesting, isn't it, how you could literally have written a book and your brother might be like, listen, mate, can we just not talk about this over lunch today? Like, I'd really appreciate that. I've certainly found that as well. Like, even started writing a newsletter, and we've got this YouTube channel, and I don't know if my brother and sister have watched or read any of it, frankly. I certainly never get any questions, which normally means they probably didn't.
Right.
Gosh, how funny. And so to step further back than just last year then, what was the pain point that brought you to Bitcoin? What was it that made you understand, actually, this is something I need to take notice of? And perhaps you could just talk to us a bit about like what made you realize it was something you said, actually, fuck it, I need to get out and start telling people about this.
Yeah, so the pain point would have been huge life change back in 2014. Big decision to quit my career, take my 4 kids out of school with my wife and start traveling the world with them, take them out of the education system, take me out of the work system, and just live as free as we possibly could. And this was all pre-Bitcoin. So the pain point there was, oh shit, how am I going to live on savings for the rest of my life, only being 37 years of age at that point? And I'd always been very much a keen saver. I have to thank my parents, for that, of course. Very good upbringing on, whatever you earn, take X amount and just save and just save and just save. So after an 18-year career, I had built up a nice pot, but then I could see that it was just wasting away. And now all of a sudden I was unemployed, and we were, kind of going on a big jolly around the world. So the pain point was, you better figure out something to make your money work for you, which I'd always been trying to figure out anyway via investing. That's when I first came across Bitcoin, but didn't really grasp onto it, couldn't really fathom it. And it took me a good year of just trying to figure it out. Hang on a second, what is this thing? Why are people still talking about it? I watched some interviews with some heavy hitters back then. Kudos to Real Vision at that point for bringing on people like Trace Mayer and Wences Cesares. Who was the other one? Tur de Mista. These guys back then were doing amazing work in communicating what this opportunity was and how it worked. And, it being, for me, the chance to get in on a financial instrument or asset or savings plan, for want of a better word, before, Wall Street, before any of the fuckery come. And that for me was like, this is a really interesting opportunity. Number go up. That's all I saw, because then my pain point was make my money work for me so that we can, have a big safety net whilst we were traveling, and trying to keep myself out of an office job for as long as I possibly could. So that was the pain point. Found it eventually back end of 2015 when I'd done I found it in 2014, but did the work and started, building a position and moving some savings across slowly at the back end of 2015. So then fast forward to 2019 when back end of 2019 when I started thinking about doing the podcast. That was when it so suddenly started clicking for me. So it was a long time, having originally learned about it, read about it, and then invested in it, going back and forth on it. Got caught up in 2017 with all of the shitcoinery, got pulled down the path of Dash, Litecoin, Ethereum, of course. And I look back now and I see the snake oil that was being, rubbed on all of those different mock chains, I call them now, that I was pulled into, like the whole smart contract bullshit of Ethereum, the whole kind of, what was the Dash thing? The reason I was hanging on to these things actually is because I come from a financial background in the financial markets, I was very used to investing in companies where I could deeply investigate who's the CEO. I was always like, who's the CEO? Where's he coming from? Why did he build this company? Did he build this company, or was he just hired in? Where was he before, and what's his track record? That would be, or her, that would be where I would always start with my analysis of, do I want to invest in this company? So that was really still weird for me with Bitcoin. I just couldn't figure that my fiat brain would not let me make that leap immediately. So when these other coins started coming along, and someone like Ryan Taylor at Dash, who's very well spoken, would talk about and present, the Dash and the idea behind the DAO and the decentralized autonomous, what's the O stand for? Organization. Yep. That was suddenly started clicking for me, and it's like, yeah, this is great. And so obviously number was going up there. So I made some rash decisions with some of the Bitcoin I'd already acquired and moved them into these different things. So learned my lesson the hard way, like many of us have. Then realized, as we were coming into 2018, 2019, I suppose, these are all bullshit. There's only one. And that work was really cemented by people like Saifedean and Robert Breedlove, Knut von Holm, those people that were putting out the articles, Parker Lewis, Andreas, obviously, in the early days. I forgot to mention him. When these articles started coming out and the books, it was like, whoa, massive light bulb. Like, this is it. This is the one thing. Why didn't I see that before? I was kicking myself as hard as I could. So moved everything across. And by the back end of 2019, I was so convinced, my conviction levels had just gone through the roof, that like I said, once you've seen it, you can't unsee it, and you've just got to tell as many people as you possibly can about it. And I remember, big kudos to Max, Bit by Bit. I don't know if you listen to his pod, guy in the UK. He's got a great pod. He had invited me on to his podcast out of the blue, out of nowhere. I don't know how he found me on Bitcoin Twitter, but he wanted to bring me on to talk about my book, because I'd written a book called Choose Life, about our travels and escaping the rat race, and homeschooling and world schooling, and home swapping our way around the world. So I of course I accepted, and I happened to be in London that week, and we met up, and we spent 3 hours just banging on in his kitchen being recorded, and he released it. And I remember talking to him afterwards, and I'm like, mate, I think I got to do a podcast. Like, this is, being exposed to what you're doing and how you do it and how simple it seems to be. The barrier to entry is zero. I didn't even have the mic at that point. It was just earphones and a laptop. I have all the things. Anchor is free. I have the skills. I can connect. I can network. I've done interviews before. I'd hosted 2 homeschooling summits, global homeschooling summits beforehand. So I knew how it all, worked, and how to get the audio right and whatever else, and just went for it. And not looked back, because I don't know whether that was a golden moment, because we went into lockdown, March? So all of a sudden, everybody had a lot of time on their hands. So anybody I was reaching out to was kind of, yeah, I'll come on the show, no problem. But you guys are probably finding the same, that the community is so open with their time, and happy to. It's crazy.
Well, I've got a ton of questions, Daniel, but Jigsy, jump in, mate.
So I only thought you only had 2 kids, Caitlin and Lauren, but you've got 4.
Yeah. So
are they much younger, or is Kate? Is it Caitlin the eldest? Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. Yes, she's 16. Sophia is 14. Then Lauren has a twin brother, Samuel. And
okay. And how old are you?
I'm 45.
45. Oh, 41. So not far off. But you've got the jump on me with kids.
Yeah, we went from 2 to 4 pretty quick. So it's a surprise twin pregnancy doubles you down with an alarming efficiency.
Yeah. So as you know, myself and Jake, we're stuck in Australia, and we've seen some horrific laws being implemented, and we've had to think about these things of homeschooling and, well, we did homeschooling for, well, I did, Jake's little girl's too young, but homeschooling for almost 2 years. And yeah, so we're starting to have these things where worrying about our kids, do we travel, do we move somewhere else, and all these things. So this is what I want to find out from you, your experiences of doing that. You know, like, how did you find that, traveling with your kids and having to homeschool them? I mean, I've talked to my old man about this, who's in his, you know, mid 60s. He's from England as well, and you know, lived his youth in England and is South African. But yeah, he's against doing the homeschooling thing, obviously, because that's all they know. But now that we've done it for 2 years, you know it can be done, and you know it probably can be done remotely, but it's still a scary thought to make that transition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very scary thought, and it's very much like, you know, once you've separated money from state, you will naturally want to separate education from state, because, you know, you see through, you know, the emperor's wearing no clothes in the education system. It's a top-down, totalitarian, authoritarian regime, whereby the curriculum is made by the education minister or board that sit at the very top. You know, the unelected bureaucrats, as we love to talk about in the Bitcoin space. So what does that mean? It means, like, a new party comes to power. So the old party gets cleared out. That means all the education minister, health minister, transportation minister, all of these guys, they get cleared out, right? Who were doing a shit job in the first place, by the way. It doesn't matter. These things are uncontrollable, as you know. So a new party comes in, and the one person that has won the vote, he's the one elected person, then divvies out all of these jobs to all of his little minions that have been towing the line for as long as possible, who are just trying to bring up their own political career, right? So yeah, you get the finance ministry, you get education, you get health. There's no experiment. Like, it's a complete experiment. There's no science to who actually gets these jobs, right? It's all political bullshit. So what does that education minister now do? Oh, they're going to shake up the education system. Yeah, of course you are. You're going to change this system that is put in place to serve you. No, you're not. You're going to make the tiniest bit of change. You're going to make all these noises and all these promises, and absolutely nothing's going to change. And all of these rules are going to get passed down your chain of command. All of these layers lay above the actual kids in the school, right? These are the guys that are getting screwed at the bottom, the kids and the families, because there's no protection for us from all of that shit that rolls downhill. Yep. So above you, you've got the teacher, then you've got the head teacher, then you've got the headmaster, then you've got at least one, maybe two governing school bodies that are in, you know, you have the district one, then the county one, then the state one, and then you get to the actual top. And any of this, this is all, these layers are put in place to make sure that there's absolutely no way that anybody at the bottom can challenge the top. Perfect example of what's going on right now, you know, the masking of kids in schools. This is absolutely disgusting. It's complete and utter nonsense. These masks are scientifically proven. I mean, come on, they're not even masks. They're hankies on a piece of elastic wrapped around a kid's head. It's just retarded that we're still doing this. And this virus doesn't even affect the kids. We've had it. Our kids have had it. I've had it. My wife's had it. You know, the kids took them 2 or 3 days and they just bounced back from it. So why do we even, it's just complete nonsense. But of course, we've still got kids masked at school. So my oldest, she chooses to go to the lycée here, which is from the age of 16 to 18, because she wants to go and hang out with her friends when she can, and meet new people. You know, fair enough. And she actually wants to drive and try and get herself the baccalaureate, that it's called here in France. The I don't know what equivalent that would be in Australia. So okay, fine. The other 3 are online. They're doing self-led directed education at home. I wrote an email to the headmaster just the other day. I'm like, basically along the lines of, when does this stop? Because she was off sick for 4 or 5 days with a sore throat and a mouthful of ulcers and cold sores. Like, this is a direct result of wearing these damn masks all day long, every day. And the kids are swapping them around because if one of them forgets it, then they just, oh yeah, borrow mine, no worries. This is nuts. This is completely unhealthy. And he just comes back, stock response. I have to put into place and make sure that the safety of the children is upheld by the rule of the state.
Yeah, he's just following.
Yeah. So there's absolutely no chance to challenge any of these rules. So moving away from that and getting out of that system is just such a breath of fresh air for the family. It's incredible because all of a sudden you just feel that pressure lift off of you, and you have no idea actually how much pressure is on the kids from a very young age. It starts at the age of 3 in France, 5 I think in the UK. I'm not sure what ages kids go to school in other parts of the world. What is in Australia these days?
They start. So my daughter did her first year of school, age 5. So she's it's prep, and then grade 1 she's 6. So we don't have the masks as such here yet for the kids, but there is talk of mandatory vaccinations for kids age 6 and up or 5 and up from January. They pull that stunt. That's it. I'm out.
Mandatory.
My 3-year-old had COVID when it first came out, and he bounced back, like you say, in 3 days.
A drug so good we need to mandate it. It's complete nonsense. And putting this in kids when this virus doesn't affect them. So why would you take all of the upside risk of a vaccination, an injection?
Well, some people will tell you it's because they have no choice. They'll go, I have no choice. I can't afford, or the childcare. I have to, here in Australia, they have something called no jab, no play. So you cannot access government-funded childcare services unless your child has done every single vaccination the government requires you to have.
That's only for childcare, Jake. Because I learned
it is. That's the stage.
And then once they start school, it doesn't matter if you've had the jab, you're fine. So all of a sudden, magically, you're fine.
Well, funnily enough, we went to a kindergarten today, and the reason they started 3 years ago was because the lady had done 10 years working in prep, so like whatever that is, 5 to 10, and she noticed that lots of the kids were arriving at school from families that hadn't been in childcare, and they weren't very well behaved, didn't understand a timetable and a schedule of the school. And so her solution to this problem was like, well, hang on, there must be so many families out there that aren't able to get their kids in kindergarten, way more than the government will ever let you know. And so she started this little thing, and she spent 2 years studying how to get around all of the government paperwork. It was really interesting. But no, Jigs, you're right. That is just for the very, very early stage. But yeah, long story short, if you don't pump your baby full of everything the government tells you to put in there, you can't access the state-funded childcare, which for a lot of people is like a non-negotiable. Otherwise, they can't go to work. If they can't go to work, then the family has no money. And so they find themselves in these situations where it is fucking hard. And it's questioning the system becomes much harder. And I think that's one of the fascinating angles of the freedom that Bitcoin gives you, not just financially, but also just intellectually, to start thinking about something differently. I mean, Daniel, you mentioned brilliantly, like money from state, the separation of that. What an extraordinary time we're living through that's even conceptually possible. But number two, well, what else do you want to separate from the state? And you mentioned the freedom that you experience as a result of doing that. I was going to just chime in and ask, like, what do you think are some examples of that? Like, I immediately think of, school holidays, for example, and not being like strapped into like a geographic place at a specific time for a certain period of the year. Perhaps you could just talk through some of the benefits that you've experienced as a family, not being attached to a kind of state-funded system or process like the education system.
Good question.
Yeah, totally. And first of all, just to, pull on that thread that you were talking about there, like people not having that choice, being coerced, basically. They don't have a choice because we know, because we've now learned, they've been unable to save because their money is broken. The money's been manipulated. They're just a puppet on a string. And now the government is coercing them into making decisions that they believe they have no choice other than just to follow. And there's no other word for that than communism. And you tell people that, and they just don't want to hear it. They're like, no. It's just such a big slap in the face when they realize they're living under some kind of quasi-communistic rule. No, especially not in Australia. No, we are, we're free. We're free as birds, mate. Like, no, you're not. There's no way. But yeah, I'll give you like a real basic one. The difference it makes on a family, and you probably realize this the first week that you were locked down, the school run itself is just physically and mentally draining for the whole family. It's an attack on the family, to be quite honest, because you're all waking up to an alarm. Like, one, that is a really awful thing to do, but we're just conditioned to do it. You may as well be asleep in a prison and just waiting for that thing to go off and get you up. And then you've got a frog march you've got probably go and wake your kid up some mornings and frog march them down the stairs and sit them at the table, pour some toxic shit out of a box into a bowl for them to eat and put down their throats, which is zero nutritional value. It truly is toxic. The cereals, I mean, the cereal boxes and the packaging that's wrapped in is more expensive than the actual shit that's inside the box. But this is what we're conditioned to think, and we've been sold this for our entire lives that eat your Weedos, mate, make you strong. Like, that is just complete dog shit. You've been lied to your whole life, especially about separate health, right? There's another one, separate food. So you get that down the necks, and then you get them dressed in shit that they don't want to wear, because nobody wants to wear a uniform, especially if you're in one of those schools that you're forced to wear uniforms for. And then you've got to get them into the car, and then you've got to get them to the institution, and then you've got to get them through the door by a certain time, or there's consequences to pay. And the kid pays those consequences, even though there was something happened that morning where mum or dad couldn't get them to school on time. That alone, like, that's the first 45 minutes of your day, right? What a life. And the pressure that is felt on the kid. At the age of 5, they know what's going on. They know mum or dad is stressed, but they can't figure out why. And then they can't figure out why they're freaking all of a sudden jumping around all over the place, can't sit still because the sugar has just kicked in. They can't figure out why they're bored out of their minds with 30 other kids listening to a flapping head at the front of the schoolroom. And then all of a sudden it's recreation for 15 minutes where you go outside. Even if you don't want to, you're pushed outside. You'd rather sit in the warm classroom. No, you're not allowed to stay in a classroom. Classroom's got to be locked. All of this nonsense. And if you've ever read or watched any of John Taylor Gatto's work, who was he was a school teacher for about 30 years. He won an award in New York, like Teacher of New York State or something. And then he saw all of this from within the institution, and he came out of the institution and he started writing about it, and he did research into how was school ever constructed in the first place. And one of his books is called Dumbing Us Down, but the one potent video clip you can find on YouTube is called The 6 Purposes of Schooling. And it's John Taylor Gatto. It's an excerpt from a 3-hour interview with John. And they just focus on this 12 minutes where he found a book in the back chambers library room of Harvard, written, I can't remember who wrote the book now, but basically laid out in chapter 13 or 10, whatever it was, the 6 purposes of schooling. And purpose number 1 is to instill obedience. And then when you look at the institutions that we came up and how they still work, and if you apply that lens to it, you're like, okay, how are they instilling obedience? You can see it blatant, plain as day. And the other purposes go on to, make you realize that it's a sorting system, that they're sorting classes, and they're labeling the dumber guys, and they're elevating the
Smarter kids.
more intelligent guys, right? And they you know, and they'll give some like head boy or prefect and all of this kind of stuff, and the way that the size of the classes are set up, and moving on the bell, and moving every 45 minutes or an hour, you know, interrupting, and just getting people used to following orders. No matter what you're doing, stop it now, on to your next thing. Nobody can learn like that. No one. You know, we've all learned. How have we learned Bitcoin? Not in a classroom, right?
No.
On our own time,
That's
our
amazing.
own flow. You know, and the stuff we've learned. If you were told, right, you've got to sit down and read this book for the next 45 minutes, then write up some notes on it, and then have that on my desk by tomorrow morning, none of us would know what we were doing, right? We would have just given up, because that's not the way you learn.
Yeah, it's an important point you make there. Like for me, Bitcoin was such an organic way of learning about it, you know, whereas everything else I've been forced, and I was never interested in it. And then I was never interested in saving or anything like that. And then Bitcoin taught me to save. Like,
well, Jigsy, if I could just jump in, I'm biased as your co-host, but Daniel, Jigsy has a great story in that he openly says, like, he always, well, how do you have to describe it, Jigsy? So at school, how did you think of yourself as someone who, like, did you succeed academically? How do you describe?
I was academically challenged.
Yeah, and how, like, the way that you thought about yourself until really only like 3 years ago, when you started investigating. So Jigs used to work in the cash and carry business and noticed that the cash world was dying, essentially. So it's like die or innovate, and started listening to podcasts about cryptocurrencies. And then, you know, here we are today, did a crypto trading course, became a hybrid trader. It's an epic story. But quite to your point, like, I mean, Jigs, you have to explain, like, how do you used to be so harsh on yourself.
Oh, very harsh on myself.
And that's almost what the school system told you, that you didn't get into the classes that were like the right ones to be in or whatever. And so therefore your view of yourself had been eroded so much. It impacted you for 15, 20 years until, in my opinion, what I'm seeing right in front of me is this whole reversal, which is amazing to witness.
Actually, also, you know, in October 2020, because cash was on our way out, and obviously with COVID, and they offered us redundancy, so I saw an opportunity to accept a redundancy, put it straight into Bitcoin, and and retired basically at the age of 40. And to see the difference in my kids, so my daughter's 6. I've never ever taken her to school or picked her up, because my job never allowed me to do that. I had to be there early and I had to come home late. So it took an unbelievable strain on my wife, especially with our second child as well. But now I'm stay-at-home dad. You know, I'm home all the time with them. You know, take them to school, pick them up, whatever. Every weekend. It's been huge. But I really like what you're saying about, if you pull them out of the system and you move somewhere where they can just be themselves and be kids, would be an absolute game changer on top of what I'm giving them now at the moment, which is me. I mean, how many other dads can say that they're around for their whole kid's childhood?
Yeah, and I'd just like to jump in at that point. So Daniel, has it been easy meeting other families that have made decisions like this? And let's say you come across Jigs on Bitcoin Twitter or something like that. How does that process work? Because you're no longer like the alumni of a bunch of parents teacher meeting groups that kind of hang out with each other or whatever.
Right. Yeah, exactly. No, it's difficult. And we all carry psychological baggage and trauma from that institution. Yeah. Even those that walked out with straight A's. I like to point out, well, you just excelled at being average, because that's all the school is designed for. Like, who are the best? That's what, it's just average. We don't want anybody shining too much, and we don't want any, and we just want to find out who the thickos are, in air quotes. And again, John Taylor Gatto, he pointed out that the grading system is just there to it's a reflection of how manageable you are. That's what it is. It's a signal to the employers, those that have got the straight A's and the higher marks are clearly the ones that can follow all the orders better. So they are more employable in their eyes because of that. Not of the ability to actually do the job, because what the straight A's find out, that the trauma that they're taking with them into the workplace is, well, I was told if I did all of this to the best of my ability and I got all of the grades and I kept my head down and blah blah blah, then I would just get a good job. But here I am in the same kind of world doing a job next to a guy that got straight C's. I'm no higher up the pecking order than him, and in actual fact I can see he's actually better than this, and he's going to get ahead of me in the promotion. So there's all of this stuff to unpack, and it's Naomi Fisher does a great job of this in her book Changing Our Minds, which is very, very worth digging into. She's a psychologist that tries to unpack all of this, and it makes you realize, Jigsy, like I had the same thing. I basically told myself the whole time that I was somehow fluking a career, even though I ended up actually being good at it. I never felt as though I should never have been there. I should never have had that seat because I didn't get the grades I was told I should be able to get at school. So it's just complete nonsense. Freeing yourself from that is so critical. But yeah, it's tough to meet people, because so very few people do it, because it's so difficult to fly in the face of the social construct that is around you, and the narrative that is memed into existence by the state, basically. Free education is a human right. Bam. You get that one all the time. Well, what are you doing? What do you mean you're taking your kids out of school? There are some kids in Africa that would, and all of this kind of stuff. You get all of that piled on you immediately. And if free education is a human right, he said, okay, have you read the small print of that meme, that little hashtag? Because, all right, free education is a human right as long as we have the choice of what to feed them, what to teach them, when to teach them, how to teach them, in the manner that we best see fit, at the time of year that we best see fit. And you've got to fit in your whole life for the next 15 to 20 years around how we do it best to educate your child.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, what if I want to take control of that just a little bit? Nah, not allowed. You can't take your kids out of school 2 days before end of term, and you can't bring them back late 2 days after the end of term. So then, like you said, Jake, you're locked in. That's the only time you can travel. That's the only time you can spend any time with your kids. It's the only time you might be able to go on holiday, visit grandparents, do all the cool, fun stuff. Then it's back to the grindstone. What are we doing? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And Peter Gray, his book is Free to Learn. And Jigs, I think you'd like that one. And he basically turns the whole thing on its head. And he looks at, I've actually done a podcast with Peter and Naomi. You can find both of them on the Once BITten podcast, talking about this, because I think they're not Bitcoiners, but they're very important topics that they both talk about. And Peter's saying, basically, we're just, school wasn't around until like 1890. So what were we doing before that with kids? I mean, were they just marauding around the place, turning shit over, setting shit alight, just be right. That's what they were doing. They were climbing trees and learning. They were self-organizing. As human beings, we self-organize. We don't need all this fuckery. We just don't. And it's taking that trust back is very, very difficult, and putting that trust into the fact that your child is going to learn with or without another person, just telling them what to do, carrot and sticking the whole way. Like, you do it the reverse. This is like the self-directed education. This is the method that we've kind of like fallen into. And that's facilitated by a brilliant online platform called GalileoXP.com, where they sign up via Zoom. It's all done via Zoom. There's global students, global facilitators. Everyone, all the facilitators are running different clubs. So you got like a math club, a science club, a reading club, a writing club, a chess club, history club, you name it, it's all there. And the kids, they choose the clubs themselves that they want to go to and sign up and get the Zoom link for. So they build their own timetable. They schedule themselves. Sure, they miss a few things here and there. They're 10
That's
or
great.
14, right? You know, it's going to happen. But then what do you get? You get this Zoom call where the facilitator is on a call with 10 kids of different ages, of different races, of different nationalities from all over the world who chose to be there on their own back. So you've got engaged audience, and you can really start making a difference to these kids. And as parents, you just see, where is this interest right now with kid 1, 2, or 3? It doesn't matter. You know, like Sophia, for example, she wanted to start learning guitar. Okay, what do I need to do? I just need to go and buy a secondhand guitar, right? $50. Let's go. Just put it in her hands. Wait a couple of weeks. How's it going? Do you like it? Yeah, it's really cool. I'd really like to know, learn how to tune it. So I went on YouTube and I figured out how to tune it. Okay. And there's an app. Look at this, Dad. Look at this app, Daddy. And like, I can do G and F. And as long as that, is resonating within the app, then how'd you find that? Like, I don't know. Okay, well, do you want some lessons? Yeah, sure. So then you find a teacher and, off you go. Yeah. Or she really likes drawing. So you buy some nice pencils and a decent sketchbook. Just put that in her hand. Let's see what happened. And now she came on my interview with Toma the other day, Toma Strolight, who's written a kid's book about Satoshi. And she's drawing she's illustrating Toma. Yeah, basically.
Wow.
So I just snapped and sent him a picture. He's like, this is amazing. Let's let's see where this goes. And
that's so cool.
So that's the idea of self-directed education. But reading Peter's book really opens your eyes to the fact kids need to be free to play and then learn through that play. Even if they're arguing, they're self-organizing. There's, even if somebody throws a toy brick at someone, when they're very, very young, they'll figure it out. They'll know something unjust has just happened. And it's pretty amazing to watch when you just let it unfold and happen, rather than, no, you got to be at this institution at this time. We'll look after their kids. We've got this situation where parents, like you were saying earlier, Jake, parents are putting their kids in daycare from the age of 6 months or something after their, what do you call it? Parental maternity leave. Or paternity leave. Yeah, that's up now. So off to daycare. And this is wrong. And the only reason people can't afford it is because they can't save. And why can't they save? Because interest rates are zero. Why are interest rates at zero? Because we're printing the fuck out the money. Why are we printing the fuck out the money? Because
they can.
They're redistributing wealth.
Yeah.
And they're killing us and enriching themselves. Because when you print all that money, what goes up? Assets, stocks, and property. Who owns the stocks and property? The people at the top.
Mm. Well, it's so interesting how it's all connected, isn't it? I confess I did listen to one of your podcasts with Saifedean about homeschooling, and also with Naomi as well. So much of it really resonated, and you already touched on that school teaches obedience, not discipline. And I think about so much of that from my history as well. And it's like, oh my God, that's so true. And I'm actually, so I went to a boarding school, and the separation anxiety for me from the age of 8 years old has deeply affected me psychologically. And only as an adult now, 33, I've seen a psychologist quite a lot recently, and lots come out of that and taught me, like, just don't feel anything. You're fine. I'm fine. Don't talk about it. You show any weakness and boom, those little pack of hounds are on you like there's no tomorrow. It's so interesting when hearing you talk about this and then conceptualizing, like, you're lucky to go to that school, Jake. You're lucky, right? Don't ever question it. And then this whole concept of, like, if you can't send your kids to a similar type school, then you've failed. And it's like, well, hang on, I'm actually just so deep down this rabbit hole and following what you're saying with great interest and going, this can be done differently, and it can be done so much better. And where I wanted to go with this was, to me, it's really around asking questions. Throughout this interview already, you've asked questions. You ask questions of the principal of your daughter's school. When does this end? You're asking yourself, like, getting out of the rat race. Well, what can we do differently? Or, I haven't read your book yet, but I'd love to get through that at some point. How many other times has this, like, asking questions mentality got you to a more interesting place? So Perhaps it was even back, you mentioned you were working in financial markets. Like, I always find it really interesting when someone's had a, very much like a professional education in investment, or hopefully you can explain to us what it was specifically. You must have been asking questions, and then you found yourself in this place. So yeah, a bit of a double up question there, but like, how often has asking questions got you to this kind of headspace, and what other areas? We've touched on health and education, and equally, like, what was that headspace you were in when you were still in your previous job that got you to where you are today?
Yes. Yeah, good question. I was just so done with academia. I think I probably had a pretty similar kind of journey as Jigs was describing earlier. Never really liked it. Was always kind of shuffled into like the middle of the road, middle of the pack. Was told several times by a certain math teacher that I was either thick or was just never going to be A-level material or anything like this. I look back at that guy now, just like, man, what were you doing to kids? Like, what was your role? Like, why were you even there? Why were you, you're supposed to be mentoring kids? Why were you destroying them? What was that? What was his pain? What was his trauma? And I just, I kind of fell into this role, this career. My dad was working in the city of London. It was a classic journey. You lived in the southeast of London. You basically tried to get on the trains up to the city to try and find yourself a job, or you would, or you were going to be a tradesman. Basically, that they were the kind of two options that you had. So he said, well, some of the brokers will be looking for trainees. The banks at that point had already moved to, we will only ever hire people with a university degree in mathematics or economics or something like that, which clearly I was never going to fit the mold for that. So I went along and started to work as a trainee on the dollar mark spot desk in a company called Talit in Tokyo. So this is when the Deutschmark was still around in 1995, and trading against the US dollar. That was the biggest market, dollars to marks. It dwarfed anything else. The second biggest was dollars to yen, and a distant third was dollars to sterling. So I walked into that job, and I was just a complete gopher. I was getting sandwiches, I was getting coffees, I was getting scratch cards, I was taking dry cleaning down, I was getting shoes mended, watches fixed, I was getting money out of the ATM, I was parking cars, I was getting all the lunches, absolutely everything for like 16 guys on a desk who were just sitting there in a huge room, sitting there smoking as well. The whole room was just smoking. Just quoting numbers, just quoting two numbers back and forth, and but the excitement in the room, it was electric. Once it started getting busy, they're all the hand signals and everything that you see from the old days. So I started questioning then. It's like, why would anybody need a degree to come in and do this job? Like, immediately school made no sense to me. Like, I did not need to do that freaking extra 3 years trying to get A levels, which I failed twice, to come and get people sandwiches. That doesn't make any sense. And once you start earning these guys' trust, it doesn't matter how old you are. If you earn their trust and they see within you that there's an interest from this kid, let's put him in a seat and see what he does. That's when you start getting your chance. And I was like, I didn't take an exam to get this seat. They're not asking me to, apply myself and do any kind of write-ups. I've just got to prove myself, and I've got to prove my interest. And I did have an interest, and I could see for me that if you do well in this job for 15 to 20 years, you're probably going to be pretty well set. And that was the driving force for me. And then the big moment came when an opportunity came to move to Singapore at the age of 22. And right then the question went out around the room, we need someone to go to Singapore because we've lost 2 guys from the desk, and we need someone to get there, and cover and perhaps go long term. I'm looking around the room. At this point, I changed into a different room. There was 30 people, all sitting on their hands. I'm like, what? Why does nobody want to go and do that? But they were all under the pretense that London is the place. London is the apex of, finance. London is where this is going to happen. London's where I'm going to build my career. I mean, yeah, I'll go. Because I didn't believe that would, I just saw too much kind of, I don't know, hubris or nonsense tied up in these guys' decision. And yeah, off I went. And 15 years later, I went for 2 years, and that turned into 15 years. And my wife,
wow.
My wife, Claire, we were just dating at the time. She came with me. So we spent 15 years out there, had all the kids out there, built the career out there, and managed to walk away from it at the age of 37. So I don't know. I don't know where this kind of what's the word? Feeling or urge to question. It's not questioning authority per se, just questioning like the narrative, I suppose. Does that seem right? What's being rammed down my neck? And then when I left my job,
I imagine your colleagues thought you were completely insane. You're 37. Yeah, you're like well ahead of the game. Like, what the fuck are you doing, mate? This is totally. Now is the time. Where are you going? Totally insane. In fact, I left one company at the age of 34. I'd had enough, and we'd found out that the guy running that particular desk at the time had been, shuffling shekels into his own pocket rather than, fairly distributing them amongst the staff. And this had been going on for a couple of years. So I just walked. And the company took me to court for that. That was an interesting one for breach of contract. So they thought then at the time, you're crazy. What are you doing? I said, well, no, I'm not sticking around for this. I'm going somewhere else. There's other options out there. I'm just going to go, and I've got an option on the table. I'm going to take that. So that was like the first point of, no, you're crazy. You stay here, because they'd counter offered very, very, very strongly and given me the option to even perhaps co-run the desk. No, guys, this went on your watch, see you later. You were signing these checks off, you knew what was going down. So when I left, actually at 37, yeah, you're right. These guys were like, what are you doing? But a book turned my head upside down. It was The 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. And like Jigsy said earlier, I'd never done the school run. I'd had 4 kids. I weren't seeing them. My wife was just completely shot come the end of the day, looking after the 4 of them, getting them around town, getting them where they needed to be, not just the school, but all the other activities, whether it's ballet or swimming or, whatever else, right? You name the event that the kids are doing. Then reading that book made me realize, I was living a deferred lifestyle that you're just on this hamster wheel. It's a road to nowhere. You're gonna wake up one day, your kids are gonna be grown up, and you're gonna realize you were just never around them, and you're gonna be pretty unhappy about that. So that made me really deeply question, why am I even here? And I'd already had questions about my job. I'd already been talking deeply with a customer of mine. I'm like, Dave, what are we doing? Actually, you say to me, Princey, I need to move $100 million into yen at this strike in 6 months. Go find me a price. I find you the price, and then you do it. We're just moving money. We're not even touching the money. We're just moving numbers across a screen. I've got 3 or 4 screens in front of me, all these different rates, blah, blah, blah. And then we transact, and that gets moved digitally to there. And where did that come from? And where's that going to? And who's the winner and who's the loser? And it taken me 17 years to even get to that point and start questioning what we were doing. It doesn't feel as though we're adding much to society to me, mate, does it? He's like, whatever, mate.
Where's the rates? Let's go.
Yeah, shut up and do it.
And I was the same like that. I mean, I was my last job. I was there for 20 years, and you know, I never went to university or anything like that. So when I decided to walk away from that, all my friends thought I was nuts. They're like, "Listen, you've been here for 20 years. That's your job for the rest of your life." And I'm like, "I'm not doing that for the rest of my life." You know, and my whole goal growing up as a kid was, one, to represent a country at rugby. I was a decent rugby player, and my second goal in life was to be the best dad I could be, because my dad wasn't around for me as a kid. I was at boarding school like Jake and that. But how can I do that if I'm stuck being at work at 6 in the morning and coming home at 7 at night? And the one job I had to be at home for was to bath my kids, and I couldn't even do that because I was stuck at work. So yeah, it was a huge decision to make. That's the best decision I've ever made. But now the game is not over. I need to, you know, like what you've done, and talking to you and seeing your experiences, and it's given me more confidence to maybe look at this next step.
Yeah, it's a great story, isn't it? I have to say a couple of points really resonate with me, Danny. I did some work experience in Liverpool Street with Jeffrey's Bank, sitting on, we were looking at, well, the whole trading floor, basically. We're looking at all sorts of derivatives. And I mean, this was 2007, so no smoking on the trading floor, but I know the environment. And I actually, I ended up working and still do, as a physical shipbroker. I had a stint in the startup space in between now my current job. And I also lived in Singapore for 4 years. So I had plenty of friends that were working in, you know, for Tullets, for example, you know, moving money around the world. And you're right. Like, what are they actually doing? And even in the shipbroking space I work in, to a degree, it's the same thing. Like, you're helping people trade freight. Are they actually moving ships and cargo around? Like, arguably no. Where I wanted to go with this though was,
what years were you in? Were you in Singapore?
2012 to 2016.
Shipbrokers. And who were you working for at that point?
A company called Arrow Shipbrokers.
Yeah, I remember those. Yeah.
Okay, there you
those.
go.
So you probably knew we had shipbrokers at GFI. We had Simon Pallant.
Oh, you were working at GFI. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we had Simon Pallant there, and Dickie.
So Simon became a colleague of mine at Arrow. So I know Simon. There you go.
Yeah.
Small world.
Good, very small world, especially in Singapore world. Yeah, I remember going over and speaking to Simon and Dickie one day, and on the floor, and looking out at the boats, and I'm like, how are you broken these? Like, you know, do you see where they're parked, and then like you say, right, you go next. Like, what's in it? You know, please explain to me what.
Well, I was going to say, they probably didn't bother explaining to you. They were like, let's go and have a beer outside. Shut up.
Yes.
Well, so shipbroking at its very simple level is very like hiring a car. Like, where are you going to get the car? What kind of car are you getting? How long are you taking it for? Is there any fuel in it? What are you going to do with it? And when are you going to give it back? And that's a very, very simple level as to what you're doing. So all those vessels sitting off the coast of Singapore, the Singaporeans have basically got the cheapest fuel in the whole of Asia. So everyone will try and sneak past there if they can. They've also got tax breaks on spare parts and crewing and all that kind of stuff. So it's become a huge hub, as you know, for business throughout Southeast Asia. And that's why you see so many ships there. Equally massive tax breaks for companies to go and get set up there. So all the big mining companies that I'm dealing with, like BHP and Rio Tinto, they're all on 10-year long, you know, zero corporation tax. It's been rolled over for another 10 years. So I'm now in Melbourne, but the companies, these companies used to be in Melbourne. They used to be in the UK or in Belgium or wherever they once were. And they're now based in Asia. It is a very, very interesting industry, like understanding I used to call it like the capillaries of an economy. Like, if you don't understand how much raw materials going into what's going on today, then you don't really understand what's going on. And it is extraordinary how much stuff is on the water today being shipped to specifically China to develop steel or to create energy from electricity power stations. It's nuts what you see really going on. I have enjoyed it a lot.
I did my last year of my career, I did a stint commodity brokering for a company in Singapore that were brokering soft oils, like veg oils, palm oil, and all that kind of coconut oil and stuff out of Thailand, Indonesia, and blah blah blah. So I got a little glimpse at the shipping and how it works, and it was just truly, it is mind blowing how complex it is, and then to have closed down the economy for the last 18 months, and like the governments around the world like scratching their heads, oh, we can't figure out why supply chains are like fucked. You know, well, it's so simple. And like, to your point, you have no idea how much is on the water. And when I saw as well, with these oil deals, we'd have crude oil as well that we were brokering. Like a ship would have filled up, let's say in Singapore, and would be on its way to Oklahoma to unload there. And it might be 3/4 of the journey across to get there, but that load gets sold to someone else, and then it has to be redirected back to Asia before it's even made the port. And so you see the inefficiencies and the ridiculousness of a lot of this stuff that's going on. And the other thing as well, like, how do you pronounce it? Demurrage?
Yeah, demurrage, yeah.
Demurrage. These fees that you pay per day if a boat is just sitting there empty is nuts.
Yeah. Well, and a good example of that now, I mean, we digress from Bitcoin, but it is connected in a sense. The freight rates you currently see are extremely high. And this can be driven from a fundamental perspective, which is literally supply versus demand. Or it is driven by that, which is supply versus demand. And you get these boom and bust cycles. So as the freight rates climb, obviously it's more profitable to build new ships. And so people go and rush the shipyards and they say, let's build a whole load more ships. And it ends up being quite specific to each niche. So you've basically got three big markets, the wet market, the dry market, and the container market. Wet, obviously, being liquefied natural gas or crude oil. You need to have a tanker. You've got to screw the top on. It's double hulled. You can't leak. Dry bulk is what I work in. So iron ore, coal, grain, sand, cement. It's a big floating bucket. You just pour it in, it sails off. And then lastly, containers being Maersk, etc., with the big box ships. And right now, I don't know what it is today specifically, but containers have been through a huge boom, and they were at one point $100,000 a day in the last few months. And so if a container liner pulls up at a port and it's costing you 100 grand a day, you want to get it discharged fucking quick, right? Now, COVID rules mean that there's only a certain number of stevedores who are allowed in the port. So the port is functioning at sub-capacity levels, which basically means that there's a huge fucking queue. Now, off LA right now, there's something like 70 container liners waiting to discharge. Now, old BITten will stand up there and say, oh, you guys are ordering too much during lockdown online, and that's why this has happened. It's complete and utter garbage. It's the simple fact that the ports have been forced to operate in a restricted capacity. And all this does is just choke the whole supply chain up. So you get these bottlenecks all over the place. The knock-on effects being simple. So outside Shenzhen recently, I had a dry bulk ship that was ready to discharge, and it was on at like $30,000 a day. Now, they couldn't find what's called a pilot, the specialist ship captains that work for each individual port. So you turn up on the outer port limits and they drive into the berth using their local guy. But there's a shortage of pilots. And so guess whose pilot is going where? The guys with the brown paper bag and the 100 grand a day ship are like, get that pilot to my ship right now. So the 30 grand a day guy is stuck there, and they can be waiting 10, 20, 30 days. You've then got regulations, like, to take Australia as a specific example. The Australian government are completely and utterly paranoid about cases of coronavirus. And so a ship coming inbound to Australia, if they find there's a case on board that ship, they will not let it into Australia, full stop. So you then have to organize a crew change. The ship arrives off the coast. You have to discharge the crew to a compound somewhere in Australia. The poor people get sat there for God knows how long. You have to get a brand new crew sent over. They all have to be tested a gazillion times. They end up then on the ship. And then sometimes the head charterer will turn around and say, oh no, we don't like the COVID history of that ship. Sorry, we won't accept it. So you've suddenly either got a cargo on board the ship that's valued at God knows what, with a rate per day that's costing you God knows what, that can't discharge. And it's all driven from government policy, not from, oh, you guys have ordered too much stuff online, or, there was a terrible grain harvest this year and therefore the price of grain's gone up because there just isn't as much. It's all It's all noise, all of it. And much like when you first really
noise.
understand that Bitcoin is a new neutral monetary system that cannot be fucked with, it just suddenly cuts through everything. And you go, oh my God, that's actually incredible. And it's going to have an impact, of course, in the shipping space in terms of all of these cross-border payments that we have that are, using hundreds of intermediaries to spend money between international companies. All of the paperwork that's involved in moving valuable cargo around the world is still done on email and fax machine. You have something called a bill of lading. For ship loads in a country, the cargo receipt is the bill of lading. Now that receipt has to get physically to the discharge for them to accept it as the same cargo. And sometimes you can't get it there. So they have these things called LOIs. I won't go into more detail, but long story short, it's not done digitally. It's crazy. No. And I see, that will obviously develop hugely in the future. So yeah, to your point, it's a very complex space. Daniel, I'm conscious of time, so I think we've powered through our allotted period. Yeah. Thank you very much.
I got one question for you.
Go on, Jigs. Wrap it up.
I saw you listening to, interviewing Michael Saylor, and we talked about at the start of this discussion how you find it hard with your family to get Bitcoin across to them. Do you think Saylor has the same problem? Do you think his probably. Family is struggling to get his close family over the line?
I would imagine so. It's even the best of us. I'm not too sure.
My parents, my brothers and sisters. I haven't tried aunties and uncles and stuff like that, but friends, I think I'm mad. I think I'm nuts.
And they feel sorry for you, right? Because they think you're going to lose all of your money and end up broke and living under a bridge. Good question about Saylor. That's funny. He's a bachelor, so he hasn't got a wife to worry about pilling her. So that's one good thing. But as for his parents and siblings, I don't know. I hope so. I hope they're paying attention. Although if they're not, I think he's probably got them covered. So, yeah.
He's got to get a couple of get out of jail free cards, hasn't he?
Yeah. He was on Safe's podcast. I think that's being released tomorrow. It's like a 3-hour megathon. Like we were part of the. I don't know if you're aware, but if you go to safetin.com and sign up, and you can see his courses and stuff, but then you can just participate in the podcasts. So you get to watch the podcast live as a fly on the wall in Zoom and interact with the guests and ask questions. And he had Saylor on last week, Monday actually, Tuesday, I can't remember. And it's huge. And the big one for me was when he says every month they have cash operating, free flow cash of 50 million. That's their right. Once we hit 50 million, anything over 50 million, we're going to sweep into Bitcoin. So that's how he's DCAing every month. Wow. And he says, and I'm on the phone to the finance guys come the last third of the month. They're like, have we hit the 50 yet? Have we hit the 50 yet? Because the 50 is the key. It's like, we'll keep that in cash. That's our cash flow. That's going to pay, employees and whatever else and other contractual obligations. But anything over that, DCA, baby. And
wow.
We'll see some more of his bond issuances as well, I'm sure.
It's interesting. Just as a final point, I met in person some Bitcoiners in Melbourne this week for the first time, and specifically some of the guys that set up something called the Bitcoin Bush Bash that's going on here at the moment. And,
who'd you meet, Bill? And
I met the Wizard of Oz.
Yes, all right.
Armin the Parman and a couple of other people here in Melbourne, and it's classic meeting people in person that you haven't met before. And so he was wondering, what do you think the total volume of DCA is, per value, annually, or in terms of freshly coined Bitcoin? How much of it's going straight to the DCA army? And we didn't really know the answer, but when you hear stories of that, like Saylor 50 million plus per month.
Yep. And look how quick it's happened.
10 quid a day, isn't it?
Look how quick it's happened, because we didn't have this in 2019. 2019, arguably. The guys that really pushed the DCA were in Australia, Amber, Alex's
Alex,
company, Svetsky's company. Swan really did a great job of communicating DCA. They really did, pick up the slack on that and drive home the importance of this method of just each day, each week, each month, whatever it is you can do. Don't overstretch yourself. Just commit to it. Set it and forget it. Use all of the little memes, whatever, to try and get that point across. But now, the services around the world are crazy. All the exchanges you can do auto buy, DCA. You can do it on Revolut now. For those people, Cash App. There's hundreds. So how much has that brought up the the buying pressure? A lot. We need a lot more. What comes onto the market each day at current price? I think it's around $42.5 million worth of Bitcoin.
Yep.
If you're 6.25 times 10 times 24 at like 50 grand, whatever it is, it's something like that. So a lot of cash needs to be swept up each day. It used to be just the plebs. Ain't anymore. Now we've got the president of a country and MicroStrategy coming in and just they've joined the line. That's the way I see it. We've got presidents and CEOs joining the front line of plebs that were there before, back in 15, 16, 17, 18, when all of this pressure and sell pressure would come on. That's the thing. You got to remember, the price of Bitcoin is pressured every day. Every 10 minutes, there is pressure on the Bitcoin price. Huge amounts of pressure on the Bitcoin price. So it takes a lot of buying power and buying pressure to offset that. And it's just amazing to see that we're already at the point where institutions are putting it on their balance sheet, countries are converting to becoming a Bitcoin standard, and we've got a halving in another we're 2 years, just over 2.5 years away from the next halving. So the pressure on the price gets halved.
Yeah.
And if we're building all of this DCA action in over the next 2 years, supply and demand, like you said, it's a one-way ticket.
Oh, it's very exciting, isn't it? Well, Daniel, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much for your time. Really great to get to know you a bit better, and great to hear your story. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your experience.
Thanks for inviting me on. I wish you all the best with the podcast.
Thanks, bud.
Thanks, Daniel. Appreciate it.
Cheers.